All right. Welcome, everybody, to Standing for Truth. My name is Donny. This is Matt. And we are here for an impromptu program answering the question. The important question is evolution compatible with science? The answer is no. I hope everybody enjoyed this program. It's that simple. So, Matt, we're going to shut her down, brother.
Sounds good. See you guys tomorrow.
The quickest evolution refuting program in existence. So, everybody, we are here with, again, the man, the myth, the legend, the powerhouse, who's clearly been getting a lot of sun over there in California. I'm trying to keep up with you, so I've spent some time in the sun over the last couple days here in good old Canada. And so, Matt, tell us, how have you been? But also, are you as excited as I am for all of our upcoming events that we have booked, specifically you and I, on topics related to what? Adam, Eve, biblical creation?
Oh man, yeah, I'm excited, but also a little bit nervous because we have so many, and I don't know my schedule. So it's like, oh my gosh, I hope I have nothing planned that day. I gotta shift things around just to make it work. We have a lot coming up, and
Yeah,
I don't even keep track of the schedule. I just kind of look at the calendar every few days and I'm like, oh,
right. I'm in a way, I'm your secretary when it comes to booking, right?
yeah,
Not just make sure you're here on this day, and this day
yeah,
in
and tell me,
June at these times.
yeah, and oh, by the way, this is what we're debating against. I'm like, oh,
Right,
okay,
exactly. And by the way, one of them's a 4-hour debate. Oh, okay, just great.
yeah.
So a Christian in the chat, $2 super sticker. Appreciate the support. Young Earth creation for life. Amen. But what do you mean? You don't believe that you're related to banana plants, whales, chimpanzees? You know, I mean, that's what science says. And Matt, that's what we're going to spend some time answering, is evolution compatible with science. But before we do, I will screen share and let people know a little more about what we are talking about in terms of our events. Matt and I will be speaking June 17th here. Did Adam and Eve exist? The answer is yes. And the scientific evidence that we will be presenting will blow your mind. Critics are incapable of refuting this evidence. We know from experience, and that includes theistic evolutionists. So, for example, we were scheduled with Ben Kissling tonight to respond to this video here by a theistic evolutionist, Redeemed Zoomer. Evolution does not contradict the Bible. We have a lot prepared for this one. Very easy video to refute. But one thing I've noticed, Matt, you've probably noticed the same thing. Your theistic evolutionists, they are not up to date at all. I mean, in this video, Redeemed Zoomer, he calls Neanderthals almost human. Well, I guess he forgot the fact that we literally have Neanderthal genes. We interbred with them, Neanderthals and modern humans. We produce fertile offspring. What would he suggest in his biblical model? Bestiality was taking place, and not only bestiality, but, you know, beasts and humans were able to produce fertile offspring. What's going on here? Like, this is getting pretty wild with these theistic evolution.
Maybe like a
Anyways,
pre-Adamite view.
yeah, who knows? I mean, him saying Neanderthals are almost human. And
Yeah.
I am curious. I'll play a little bit of it just to get your thoughts on some of it, but just a couple minutes, because to the audience, I know that everybody was looking forward to our program today, responding to the full video. Ben Kissling, Sam, and I are still doing that, but we've rescheduled it for June 9th because Ben is a little under the weather. So pray for him, pray for a quick recovery. Since we have events nearly every single day, June 9th was the next free day for everybody. So that's when we'll be doing it. Anyways, all that to say, theistic evolutionists especially, they are not up to date on this debate. I never see them, or rarely see them, engaging our best scientific evidence. Usually they're unaware of it. So here's time, location, about the event. So yeah, Matt and I, we are going to be giving a comprehensive presentation. Did Adam and Eve exist? We're also going to be on the Real Science radio program discussing scientific evidence for Adam and Eve at the beginning of July, which I'm excited for. That's going to be fun. And we've got a debate seminar coming up with Culture Cats. And I would consider Culture or Conspiracy Cats a friend. He is one of our favorite evolutionists. He's fun to spar with. He's fun. He's a good sport. And so I'm excited that he's the one that we are going to be engaging in our first biblical seminar debate. Why it's a seminar is because it is going to be structured in a similar way that a seminar would be. We're going to be having very long opening presentations, almost an hour each, very long responses, and just a lot of engagement. And so the goal of this is to basically give the best representations possible of both sides of the model, which brings me, the models, I should say, Matt, which brings me to my first question to set the foundation. Get ready. It won't be anything too difficult. Let's just say, and I like to ask guests this because it's important to have comprehensive presentations going over all the evidence, refuting objections, addressing challenges. But it's also important that we have quick, clear, and oftentimes simple answers to tough questions too. And so let's call this an elevator pitch type answer, Matt. Let's say you're in an elevator with somebody, they're skeptical, but they're open-minded. Okay. And they're skeptical because of things that they've heard, that Adam and Eve in the Bible are literal. They may have heard that science has refuted a literal Adam and Eve. Genetics makes Adam and Eve impossible. Clearly, we go back to more people than just 6,000 years ago, and we're related to chimpanzees. So anyways, the question would be an elevator pitch. You've only got a minute or two with this person, but they're seriously open-minded. Okay. And so they're wondering, what is the best evidence for Adam and Eve? How would you convince them, brother?
Ooh.
There's so much, I know. So it's like, what do I tell them? How do I answer? What evidence do I give them?
Yeah. We can go straight to the absolute origins and say, do we have a placement for Eden even to begin with? Do we have a location where these people lived? We do. Do we have, how would the original language arise? With what we know from human language, you cannot teach if a human being doesn't learn language acquisition by puberty, they can never learn language. Scripture tells us that God created Adam and he gave him language because he was naming the animals very soon afterwards. So that would make sense. Evolution has 8 different theories for language origins, and so far none of them have been able to answer the origin of language in the human beings because they're all speculative, and every time they've tried them on feral children, it's never worked. So that's another good piece of evidence to show that the version of Scripture of Adam being created with language makes more sense than any of the hypothetical scenarios that have existed that the evolutionary model has come up with that have all failed. Another one would be the Scripture talks about people living longer in the past, and they have a genetic potential of about 1,000 years. Well, now modern geneticists have come along and said the maximum potential for human beings, if we were to use CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing and remove mutations, is about 1,000 years. Just so happens to, again, land on the biblical scenario for longevity. We have the Adam being created to eat the fruits of the trees, but the animals would be created for vegetation. You compare a chimpanzee to a human, we're more frugivores. Chimpanzees, again, they're able to eat the green herb. Their appendix is used to break down plant cellulose. Ours is not. It works. Ours is an immune system, creates killer B cells. I mean, we can go any direction, literally pick anything. An elevator isn't long enough for somebody like me. We can go to
it's a big building. It's a big building. There's 1,000 floors, and you're both going onto the top floor. So you got 30 minutes.
I got 30 minutes. Okay,
I'm just kidding. We'll save that 30 minutes for the actual presentation. But yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And when you start with the scriptures, and there's a couple questions here that I'll get in first because it is another Ask Us Anything program too. Was Adam a teen when born? Yeah, clearly, and we'll get your thoughts, Matt. Adam wasn't created as a zygote or a baby. He needed to be created functionally mature and able to till the ground and to do what he was supposed to do. And so I like the functionally mature model. But what's interesting is what scientists would find with Adam is similar to what we find in the universe and the earth, right, Matt? So if scientists an hour right after creation were to come to Adam and give him a medical examination, take some blood tests, complete blood count, look at cholesterol, measure his height, his weight, you know what he's going to have? He's going to have a mix. He's going to be tall. He's going to have a weight. He's going to have hair. He's going to have a maturity level where it looks like he's old. Maybe he's been around for 32 years.
You're right. He's going to have cognition.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right? He's front loaded with that pre-existing knowledge. Okay. But then the blood tests come back. And guess what? He's got blood tests that suggest that he's young, that he's healthy, maybe, spots on his skin, no wrinkles, just looks like he's young. And so we'd have a mix, evidence for being young, evidence for being more mature or old. And that's what we find in the universe and the earth. As in, we can refute all lines of evidence, but some people might point to rocks and look to dating methods or ice core dating or starlight, things like that. So in a way, when you look out into the universe, you see a mix of things that appear to be mature, but then you have other observations where what we're clearly seeing is indicative of being young. Mutation rates, mutation accumulation in general. We could look at helium and zircon crystals, C14 in diamonds and coal and soft tissue. We could look at the number of supernova remnants in the solar system, dinosaur soft tissue, the existence of collagen where it shouldn't be, just a whole large number of pieces of evidence that suggest that the earth and universe are old. So there's a mix, and that's what we would find with Adam too. So I find that to be interesting. Matt, what are your thoughts, brother?
Yeah, especially since we would expect that if Adam was created and he didn't have mutations and he had access to the tree of life, that would have been keeping him very young and youthful because he wasn't meant to die. And then all of a sudden the fall happens, mutations start accumulating. Okay, well, we look at those mutations today, we take it back. Can we find the consensus sequence? And does it take us back to an original person that's mutation free? And just so happens we can. And then modern day geneticists who study aging, the study of biogerontology, who are specialists like Dr. Aubrey de Grey come along and say, look at that. Humans have an upward lifespan of about 1,000 years if you take away mutations. You literally can't beat that. That literally fits exactly with what we've been saying. And he is not a biblical creationist. He works for the, what institute? I know he works for longevity research for Life Extension magazine. And, but it's like, I can't remember the name of the actual company, but he's actually working on trying to reverse aging by doing these things and he has the 7 theories of aging, and he's really trying to work on the genetic aspect for extending human life. And what's going to happen is he wants to genetic edit babies so that they have that mutation free genome. So you can literally say, well, not entirely, because he wants to be able to edit. If you want to have a child with blue eyes, you can do that. But having blue eyes is more of a neutral mutation, right? It's not going to be detrimental. But he wants to wipe out all of the detrimental aspects of the genome so humans can live exponentially long. That's pretty cool.
And that's why what you present on, which you will be presenting on in our upcoming presentation, are points dealing with biblical longevity and the potential to live as long as the Bible documents. So I think that's going to be interesting for people to see. Here's a good question that you'll love, Matt. Ray G TV, good to see you, brother. Typically, we will take, as creationists, evidence from a variety of sources: historical documents, archaeology, empirical science. And it's interesting because we've done programs where we talk about how the archaeological data, historical records, the entrance or introduction of these ancient civilizations, right, like Egypt or China, the Sumerians, so on and so forth. All of this points to what? The origin of these civilizations and historical records going back between 4,000 and 6,000 years. Okay. Right. And you've made some, and yeah, it's true that the skeptics, those that deny young earth creation, they typically hand wave away those points of argument. But Matt, you've presented on, and maybe you can reiterate some of these points, where if evolution were true, isn't it kind of funny that just suddenly all these thousands of years, man just never figured out, basic rules of farming, or, can you speak to that? We put out a video and you made some great points, just how ridiculous the evolutionary model is when you consider these facts.
Yeah, I really like the fact that they say, okay, we survived in Africa for 200,000 years. And during that time, well, we're in Africa, that entire time, nobody came up with the ability to write down any deep-rooted genealogies, right? They didn't do anything like that. And then when we do go into Africa, what do we find as far as the oldest unbroken genealogical chain? Well, it goes to the Ethiopian dynasty, which takes us back to King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. It's the biblical model yet again. It's the biblical genealogies that are the oldest in Africa. Then you get outside of Africa and it's the exact same scenario. You go to the Middle East and everything branches out from that region. Like, what was going on in Africa? Like, they just didn't do anything. It just doesn't make sense. We have the size of Africa is gigantic. You could fit the United States in it, China in it, Australia. It's like all of them combined. And so we're not talking like it's just a small place and
Right.
there was just a few tribes of people. No, Africa was full of people and they couldn't do basic things. And then all of a sudden 5,000 years pops up and just everywhere, every people group worldwide,
all at the same time,
not meeting each other, came up with the same concepts. Yeah. It's just beyond ludicrous to neglect those concepts. I mean, that's what we do. And science is statistical probability. It's called p-value. And when everything matches up, the statistical probability of all of these things matching becomes so astronomical, it has to be true. That's
right.
what Occam's razor is. So we just use that. We like that. It's way better. It makes more logical sense than just saying, they're not interconnected, so just ignore it.
What's the most parsimonious explanation in light of all the data, all this data from different fields, really different areas of study that corroborate on a single conclusion? Historical writings or recorded history typically goes back, again, roughly 5,000 years ago, exactly where we expect. How far back do ancient civilizations go? About 4,000 years roughly. And so it's interesting that the genetic data also matches up to those realities. Mutation rate data, DNA diversity in mitochondrial DNA, Y chromosome. I wanted to put up this one from Andrew because taxonomy is interesting. We appreciate your comments, Andrew. This is going back to the Neanderthal question. Here's the thing, it does get confusing for evolutionists, because the biological definition of species is what? If they can interbreed, they're the same species, right? Especially if they can produce fertile offspring. And so here, Andrew says, technically all species of the genus Homo, right? You got kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Homo neanderthalensis, Homo sapiens, Homo naledi, Homo floresiensis. Okay, but the thing is, Neanderthals, arguing Neanderthals are old, they're a different species, or they're not quite human yet, as this guy Radim Zoomer argues. But wait a minute, according to the biological definition of species, if they can interbreed and produce fertile offspring, they're the same species. And there are even those in the paleoanthropological community. I've got lectures, we've posted videos where they say Neanderthals were us. They were literally us, but simply adapted to cold ecoglacial environments. And that makes sense about what we know of Neanderthals. And so this is more of a taxonomical assertion. He says all species of the genus Homo are human. They just aren't Homo sapiens. Did Neanderthals categorize themselves as Homo neanderthalensis, Matt?
No, it's
Do
like
bears
saying
care how they're this is man-made classification,
yeah,
right?
it's like saying, well, the Great Dane isn't a wolf, so they're not the same species. Well, they come from the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They come from the same. Therefore, they are the same species according to the definition of what a species is. It's real simple. That's how we know what a kind is. Sometimes there's massive amounts of diversity. Humans have lots of phenotypic diversity. Primates do not. You can't look at a chimp species and go, wow, it looks so different than those other chimps. I would have never known that was a chimp. You can't. Right. It's so easy to identify them as that because it's very low. Humans is very high. It's the exact opposite.
Right. And we talked about this in a program or two ago, that according to the evolutionary model, you have two out of Africas, right? Erectus goes out and then independently evolves, according to some models, into your other hominins like Neanderthal, Heidelbergensis, Naledi, Luzonensis, Floresiensis on the island of Flores. But in Africa, Erectus continues on and evolves into Homo sapiens, and Homo sapiens sapiens leaves Africa, spreads out to all parts of the planet. And whoa, what do we got here? We got other humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, so on and so forth. But if they're separated, Matt, maybe you can speak to this. In Africa, you got Erectus independently evolving into humans, Homo sapiens. But outside of Africa, you've got Erectus, or depending on whatever model you take, we'll go with this model. Erectus is evolving into Neanderthals, Heidelbergensis, Denisovans. Humans come out thousands and thousands of years later, meet up with so-called hominins like Neanderthals, interbreed with them. We've got gene flow, we got reproduction, and fertile offspring. If they were separated by 100,000 or more years, okay, and then Homo sapiens leave Africa, meet up with Neanderthals, okay, sure, they can mate, but are they going to produce fertile offspring? No, the genetic distinctiveness, the DNA differences that were accumulating independently should have shifted them towards the point where they would not be infertile. Isn't that right, Matt?
Right. Exactly. They even thought the exact same thing when they went to Australia and they found the Aborigines. They go, there's no way we can interbreed with them. They've been there 50,000 years, right? No problem at all, because it wasn't 50,000 years. It's obvious.
So it's simple. They weren't spread out as long as the evolutionary model would suggest.
Right. Exactly. They never predicted that all humans would actually even have Neanderthal. Remember, they said Africans won't have any at all. Then they found they had quite a bit. Uh-oh.
Right.
Another falsification.
But then what do? Post hoc.
No big deal. We learned more. You can't falsify us.
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
Real science over here.
We'll always retrofit the data to continue believing we're related to banana plants.
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
and this is what's funny about this video from Redeem Zoomer and these debates that people like Inspiring Philosophy engage in. We've refuted all of these arguments. We've had some of the best speakers in the world of young earth creation on the channel. We've done 2, 3, 4 hour responses to these guys. These guys are not interested, Matt, in defending their arguments or refuting challenges or objections. They just want to force fit their false ideas of what science teaches into the Bible where it doesn't belong. We've refuted all these guys. They don't want to engage the science. That's why all they want to do is engage. Is evolution compatible with the Bible? Matt, answer this question. Is evolution compatible with science? Which it isn't. It contradicts, depending on what you mean by evolution, change over time, changes in allele frequencies and populations over generations. Yeah, we don't disagree with that. We're talking about the evolution of common descent, the process of common descent, the increase in phenotypic complexity from fish to fisherman.
Right.
And so they want to keep asking this question, is evolution compatible with the Bible? Let's answer the question, is evolution compatible with science, Matt? What are your thoughts on that?
I would obviously say no, because of the mere fact that it is unfalsifiable, even based on the criteria that they themselves admit. So if it's unfalsifiable, it shouldn't even be classified as science, because the first thing they mention when they attack young earth creation is there's no model, you don't make predictions. Oh, okay, so let's look at your predictions. Oh, nice track record, 99% failure rate. Way to go, guys. So if that doesn't falsify the theory, nothing ever will. And that's why they mock it so much. And that's why when new theories come up that are considered fringe, like when they took cytochrome C and they started doing the phylogeny to base where do humans go back? Oh, they go to Neanderthal, and then it goes to chimpanzee, then gorilla, oh, and then a pig. What's there a pig doing there? That shouldn't be there. That nested hierarchical pattern should exist all the way. And then so what do? A geneticist comes out by the name of Eugene McCarthy, and he says, oh, look, it's true. The genetics really match this. There must have been a hybrid scenario going on. So a chimpanzee and a pig must have mated with one another, and he created the hybrid hypothesis. Well, he was attacked for his view so much that he said, I can't believe it. My own community has attacked me. Like if I was in church and I were to say that Jesus isn't God, that he said that's what it's like to attack Darwinian evolution. And he's a modern day geneticist who dared say, there's something going on here. There's a hybrid scenario going on. To explain it from the genetic data, there had to have been some type of a hybrid going on. And he was outright attacked. Rather than saying, nah, we can explain it better than you. Nope, they just attacked him. And this is a guy that made predictions on other hybrids and got them right. He wrote books on hybrids. He's not some random guy that lives in his basement with a PhD. No, he was very active, and he's a good scientist. And he was like, this is the only way to explain this, guys. And they attacked him. So it just goes to show you how defensive they are against this model. That's why Kent says it's like a religion. Just look at how well they defend it. They attack people that don't believe. They'll ridicule you. They'll attack you. They've
got their apostles.
Yeah. Like Matt Powell, they'll send a bomb to your house in the mail. Wow. Craziness.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild, and the truth is important. And this brings us to Ray G TV's a question here from him. This is an interesting one. I am working through this discussion that John Lennox, who I greatly respect, I've got several of his books, one of the first Christian apologists that I learned from, and he had a discussion and with a popular atheist. And I can't remember his name right now, though. Maybe those in the live chat can remind me. But I'm going through that. But there are a couple, Alex, I think. There are a couple sections in that discussion that I did get a chance to see. And so John Lennox, Alex O'Connor, there we go. Alex O'Connor. He made some good points against John Lennox, who wasn't necessarily defending the young earth creation point of view, unfortunately. And John Lennox had said, well, evolution, whether it's true or not, doesn't really matter. And maybe we'll get some of your interaction on this, Matt, because there's no explanation. There's no good scientific explanation for the origin of life, abiogenesis. All these chicken and egg problems that we have, every single theory or hypothesis for origin of life has failed. If you're looking at metabolism, carbohydrate first, or you're looking at RNA world, they both have refutations of each other. Mutually interdependent systems that we talk about just make the origin of life impossible. So John Lennox said, so the question of evolution and common descent doesn't really matter because we already have God being necessary for the origin of life. And I'm trying to reiterate these points as best as I can. And so therefore, okay, maybe theistic evolution is true. Maybe God used the common descent process. But Alex, being agnostic from my understanding, he made some good points. He's like, okay, let's give you the origin of life, supernaturally created. Then God uses this process of evolution. Well, evolution requires what? Death. It requires the death of the weaker organisms, survival of the fittest. And there's a lot of bloodshed. There's a lot of negative aspects to the process of evolution over hundreds of millions of years. And so his question is, why would God choose that process? If God could create any way, why would he choose the process where we come in at the tail end, right? What do they say, Matt? Anatomically modern humans come in at about 200,000 years ago. So all those hundreds of millions of years of just death and suffering and disease and the removal of weaker organisms. I mean, what kind of God chooses that process? He can do it anyway. So why is he choosing that process? And so there have been a lot of famous, I guess you could call them theists or deists, where, yeah, they admit, okay, intelligent design is the best answer, but it can't be the Christian God, because if whatever God is choosing to use the process of evolution clearly doesn't care much about us or life. Okay, sure, maybe he's out there, but he started life and then he removed himself from the equation. Matt, so I'm curious as to your thoughts. That's a good point. This is from a skeptic, and I didn't think, unfortunately, John Lennox had a good response to it. He kind of diverted and moved to another topic, because yeah, if you're a theistic evolution proponent, you do have some major philosophical problems there, don't you, Matt?
Yeah, we know that they can kind of explain them away. Theistic evolution is a way to just completely agree with the modern consensus and then just say the Bible's compatible with it because maybe Genesis is allegorical. Completely avoid it. Completely dodge.
Yeah.
It's got the gaps. Then you have old Earth creation. That, okay, pretty good. Getting a little bit better, I would say. Except for now there's no real model. You can just say day 1 and day 2 might have not been 24 hours. Okay, so now we have a very ancient universe. All right, fine. The heavens are old, the earth is old, but there's still no life on it yet. So then life comes in and all of a sudden it's young. So you're an old earth, but young life. So it's very interesting, very kind of like you can get away with radiometric dating and distant starlight. You've just answered those two in your model, but now you've got to explain why God waited billions of years when Genesis tells us that God created the earth to be inhabited. Well, if he created it to be inhabited, I mean, sure waited a long time. If I built a house that said I built it to be inhabited, then I don't sell it for 100 years, I'd be like, that's a weird decision.
What was he waiting for? Right.
Yeah, you really waited a while. Just seems kind of odd. I think the main view is young earth creation, and it always has been, is simply because that's what the text refers to, and that's why it's always been more popular. It's so simple. The Jewish people believed it until the advent of evolution. You can even read that on Wikipedia. It's very easy to find this information. They only changed their view recently. And I mean, it's first was their religion. You would think that they would view it, they would have come up with a theistic evolution way before modern times. They just didn't. And when in scripture, or even in science for that matter, would you get a worldwide global bottleneck like Noah's flood, for example, or in the evolutionary model, a global catastrophe like a volcano, and then primitive man goes into it, but modern day man comes out? When has an organism ever improved that dramatically, that instantly? It just doesn't make sense even in the evolutionary view. It's just pretty funny that they do that with modern humans, right? Coming from a primitive Heidelbergensis or Neanderthal split, and then we go from these primitive people all the way to super advanced cognitive functioning people.
And then when is the soul or the spirit introduced into some ancient hominin population? You've got, according to the evolution story, you got Australopithecine-like ancestors. Then you got Homo habilis. Then eventually Homo habilis evolves into Homo erectus. And many theistic evolutionists and old earthers don't even believe Homo erectus was human, even though Homo erectus has strong evidence for being a sophisticated people. They were able to sail. They were able to make fire. Okay. And then this guy, Redeemed Zoomer, says, Neanderthals are almost human. Okay. So according to him, Neanderthals, which literally buried their dead, there's strong evidence for spirituality. They sailed and fished in the open waters for tuna.
Made jewelry,
they
instruments.
made jewelry, instruments. I mean, really? These aren't human? We interbred with them and produce fertile offspring. So according to the theistic evolutionists, at what point does God decide to introduce or infuse a soul or a spirit? So that means when he does that to that single individual that is now in the Homo sapiens or human group, everything else before, even maybe that child's mother and father, apparently they're not, salvation's not available to them now. Because apparently regeneration or salvation is only possible for, humans, not almost humans.
Interesting.
I mean, that sucks for, the previous generation of hominins that didn't have a soul, right?
Imagine the hominids that were alive at the same time as the ones that got the soul. You would feel really bummed out. You're like, oh man, one generation away. I
was so close to being able to, go
one
to
generation.
But apparently, so all those hominins, when they die, it's just everything goes black or something.
Black.
Right?
They're just done. They're like that lion in the grass. Black.
So
exactly.
So you got this big population of hominins, thousands. They all look the same, with some obviously morphological variation. But as we know, evolutionists say what? Populations evolve, not individuals. And so, apparently some within the population, they're going to have the soul or the potential for regeneration and salvation and eventually glorification, new bodies, resurrected bodies. But others in the population, nope, sorry, you're out of luck. Or those in the previous generations, out of luck. There's so many issues. There's so many problems that, and when you read or you listen to what their answers are to those types of deep questions, they're very unsatisfying.
And the did you see the early skull that was found on that last interview you had just the other day? He showed the early Homo sapien skulls, and they look like Homo erectus. They're like
Right.
identical almost. There's like
Yeah.
very little phenotypic diversity going on there. So if it's based on morphology, then how would he explain the early hominids themselves? Would he look at that and be like, those weren't human either? You know, it's like the classification becomes very, very taxonomically restrictive, right? It's like looking at different breeds of dogs again. You're like, that's not the same type. It can't be. The skull's a little bit off. So again, you're playing a game. Another problem with the thing that you asked me is that theistic evolution doesn't. It's using the, like you said, we don't need to worry about evolution because we just need to focus on the origins of life, and since that's easily in our favor, we don't need to work on the other part. Well, that just, again, that's more God of the gaps, and it doesn't answer to the diversity of life on Earth. That's the job of evolution. That's why they ignore abiogenesis. They're totally different sciences. So people should focus on that aspect. We have people that do. There are people that really just focus on abiogenesis. Me and you are talking about the diversity of life. We focus on the genetics and the biology of the evolutionary model that tries to explain the diversity of life and say our model does it better. They can't even get mutations right. And mutations are the basis root of evolution theory. And if they can't get the basics right, then the entire theory falls apart. We've shown time and time again, they can't make predictions on mutation rates at all. They completely fall down. So if they can't do the basics, the entire model is trash. And they won't make predictions because Nathaniel Jensen has challenged any scientist to make a prediction, put it on paper, and debate them live on what you think the mutation rate is going to be with any animal of their choice, and they won't do it.
Well, and to a couple of things you said, great points. That's why your most militant evolutionists that we debate, you see it all the time. They say, sure, you can have abiogenesis, you can have the origin of life, but from there, they will bring up all of your favorite arguments, right, that we see from these guys for common descent, ERVs, chromosome 2 fusion, nested hierarchies, homology, transitional fossils, so on and so forth. So they don't mind giving you abiogenesis. And then to the theistic evolutionists, they're also giving them common descent, which is what the evolutionists want, the atheists want, because many atheists, like Alex O'Connor here in his discussion with John Lennox, they admitted that, okay, maybe theism is true, maybe there's an intelligent designer, but if that designer chose to use the evolutionary process of death, of pain, of suffering, then that can't be the God of the Bible. That can't be the God of Christianity. And so in a way, when you're a theistic evolutionist, you're giving the atheists exactly what they want, because now where are you going to stick God, and how are you going to demonstrate that that is the God of the Bible? And have you also noticed that a lot of your most militant theistic evolutionists, Matt, if you were to ask them, name a single technical prediction made by a young earth creationist, would they be able to name one?
They can't, because I've been on X for a year, and that's all I did. The militants would come out and they'd be like, the young earth creation is wrong. I'm paraphrasing, real short stuff. I would say, oh, tell me something about it. Can you name a single prediction? Never. So they don't know basics about something that they say is wrong. So their opinion about the subject is completely irrelevant. So it's always an emotional response you get from them. So therefore, they're not looking for answers. They don't really care. So going to this very question, does the age of the earth really matter? Well, it matters to people that want evidence. For some people, it doesn't. They might be completely fine with faith only. Some people are a little bit more rigid. There's a reason Kent Hovind has made such a difference, and that's because he's young earth creation. That's all Kent talks about, really. 95% of everything he talks about is young earth creation. And Kent has had a massive influence. He can't even be stopped. He gets banned off YouTube. He gets 200,000 views on Facebook now, more than when he was on YouTube. He just can't be stopped, and he makes a huge impact. It's just, clearly it works. Some people don't like it. It's okay. It's not everybody's going to be convinced by it, but it's a form of evidence that we like to give people. And it's a good one because people like to ask these things. And we view the scripture as presenting a young earth creation argument based on genealogies. So though it doesn't give an exact date, it does give genealogies. And they've used these genealogies going all the way back to the time of Jesus. So clearly they've been thinking about this as the age of the earth for a long time, and they've used it as evidence. So
Of course, it's important that we believe what the Bible says about all things, right? And so, is this important? Yes, for many reasons. One reason being, what does the Bible say about the matter? What does the Bible say about the age of the earth? Matt, you mentioned earlier a few of the ways that they will twist the scriptures, and we could play some of Redeem Zoomer's arguments. We're going to be responding to that in detail on June 9th. But their arguments, the way that they twist the scriptures to get an old earth or get theistic evolution, simply doesn't work. And here's a few reasons why. Firstly, Exodus 20:9-11 is a powerful verse that has been, there's been attempts to address it from an old earth paradigm, but those attempts have failed. And so it's pretty clear. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son nor thy daughter, so on and so forth. For in 6 days. So contextually, Matt, are we supposed to work for thousands to millions of years and then rest for one, or rest for thousands of years? No, these are obviously literal 24-hour days. And so verse 11 says, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all in them is, all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. The context of verse 11, looking at the previous verses, indicates ordinary days. If this passage really meant anything other than ordinary days, guess what? God could have used another word. That word is olam, which indicates a long period of time. Matt, why didn't he use a different word? Why did he use the basic word that means a 24-hour ordinary day? And that same thing applies to Genesis, because we know the Hebrew word yom has more than one meaning. But again, context is going to determine that meaning. And we know that the majority of the times, possibly every single time, I've only seen one possible exception, but I think we can answer that as well. Yom modified by a number in the Old Testament means a literal day. And again, in Genesis and in this passage in Exodus, God could have used other words. He could have used other phrases. There's a word in Genesis that he could have used, if I remember correctly, is the word door. He could have used other phrases like after many days, after some years, after thousands of 10,000 years of many generations. These are all phrases that you can find in the Bible, the book of Joshua, Daniel, so on and so forth. But none of those were used, Matt. So do you think God wanted us to understand that the earth, the universe, was created in 6 24-hour, literal ordinary days? Because again, if he wanted those days to be thousands to millions or billions of years, then he could have conveyed that in a much easier way by picking any of these other Hebrew words or any of these other Hebrew phrases, brother.
Yeah, I would say that there's a more that points to it being a single day than the arguments that are really against it. For example, I've heard, well, they probably needed to be more than a mere day because it would take longer to name the animals.
Right.
It could have taken longer than a day because Adam was lonely and needed a mate. That doesn't happen in just a mere 24 hours, unless he's like the most impatient person on earth, right? So you hear some arguments against it. So I'll grant them. I'll say, okay, let's go by God's time. There's a couple places where it might mention that for God, a day is 1,000 years. Okay, let's give 1,000 years to each one of those days. You can't really do it on day 7 because it didn't end with evening and morning. So it says that we're still in God's rest. Okay, so maybe a day was 7,000 years. Well, you're still very young earth creation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We can't push it back to the theistic evolutionary timeline. No matter what we really try to do. That's why the gap theory was created, because the gap theory says, well, day 1 and 2 was a gigantic gap. And then the other days, yeah, they could have been 1,000 years or a 24-hour period. It doesn't really matter. But the first days, and what does that go to again? It just goes to radiometric dating. And why? Because radiometric dating gives long ages. Same with distant starlight. So that's the gap theory view in a nutshell, really quick, on how they say, well, the day 1 and day 2 don't need to be, but the problem is, like you mentioned, is they're kind of followed with evening and morning. So the writer really wanted us to think that the days were 24 hours, even if they weren't. So it's kind of hard to reconcile, right? Like, what do you do? Like, it's not, but it was portrayed that way because we were supposed to set up our calendars with that notion in mind. And Jesus, even in the commandments, said, "For in 7 days God created the heavens and the earth." Right? So, it's tricky. It's kind of like, well, it's right there. It says it's 7 days. I guess I can change those 7 days into periods of time, but I can't do it scripturally without kind of some wiggle worm.
Mental gymnastics.
It gets a little hard. Like, I've tried to do it, but
well, and you make some good points there, especially on the 2 Peter 3:8 passage. A day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. And you made the good point that, okay, give each day 1,000 years. Okay, so one day, here's the equation. And this is an excerpt from an excellent article by Dr. Jason Lyle, Dr. Tim Chafee. And it's interesting because all these arguments have been dismantled. They're scriptural based arguments in detail. And oftentimes they just repeat them as if they haven't been addressed or interacted with thoroughly. So they're just repeating already debunked talking points, basically. But yeah, okay, so there's your basic equation. Okay, you're going to have what? One day is 1,000 years. So you got 7,000 years there, plus the time frame since creation. Nowhere near the billions of years. So that doesn't work for them. And clearly 2 Peter 3:8, right, is talking about the future return of Jesus Christ. And we know that in the last days, there's going to be what, Matt? Scoffers, denying 3 things: the special creation, the worldwide flood, right? The world that then was being overflowed with water that perished, the coming judgment by fire. And scoffers will say, you've been saying that Jesus is going to come back for 2,000 years and he's still not here yet. And they use that as an argument or objection to biblical Christianity and the Bible in general. And so God is simply pointing out the fact that to him, 1,000 years is like a day. It's meaningless. God is outside of time, matter, and space. And so an appeal to 2 Peter 3:8, I find to be rather weak. So again, a straightforward answer to that question is because it's important to believe what the Bible says on all things. And if the Bible is clearly teaching a young earth, then we need to believe the Bible for what it says. And so the next question would then be, Matt, okay, because someone like you and I, we don't need to twist the scriptures. We don't need to try and force fit billions of years into the Bible. We don't need to force fit a falsified theory like common descent into the Bible. Why ruin a perfectly good Bible with a theory that doesn't work? There's so many points of evidence against it. So the question is, what are some good scientific pieces of evidence, Matt, for a young earth and against an old earth, which helps to what? Confirm or verify what the Bible is saying about origins, that God created everything, the heavens, the earth, everything in them in 6 days. He rested on the 7th. Does science validate that, brother?
Well, we here on this channel know, because we get to talk to so many people that are specialists and have been doing young earth creation for such a long time. When you talk to Jason Lyle and you read through his website and ask him questions and how good he is on astronomy, and he will take you through predictions that he's made, and he's nailed them based on a young earth creation timeline and criteria. And if you don't get better than that, right? That's like, why would they be coming true at all if it wasn't some young earth creation answers that answer things so much better? Sure, theistic evolution can answer things as well, but the thing is me and you, we really go for young earth creation to give young earth creationists better answers. That's why we started this. A lot of people believe in young earth creation. I think the last time it was almost 40% of Americans believe in young earth creation, but when you talk to them, they don't know much about young earth creation. So we're like, let's fill these guys and give them a lot of knowledge. Let's teach them some things, and we'll learn along the way as well. Because Yeah, I've learned the same as you that young Earth creation isn't the problem. The critics might say, it is ridiculous. It's bad. No, because if it was bad, then the atheist would just become a theistic evolutionist. They're not. They're staying an atheist. So young Earth creation isn't their problem because they could easily just believe in evolution like they already do and just believe in God anyway. There are plenty of people, Catholics don't believe in young Earth creation. Well, I shouldn't say that. Orthodox do. But for the vast majority of Catholics, don't believe in young Earth creation.
Yeah,
because,
a lot of them are theistic evolution.
Yeah, and it doesn't affect their faith at all. So why don't they just believe that? So clearly it's not just young Earth creation that's the problem. So me and you, we like young Earth creation because it's of the science of it. And not a lot of people care about the science. And that's our strongest aspect is the I really don't want to be wrong either. And there's a part in the Bible where it actually says in the last days, there'll be scoffers and they'll deny three things. One of them is that the heavens are of old. And I thought about that. I'm like, wait, what if the heavens are really old? It started making me question it, right? I don't want to be wrong. What if the heavens are billions of years old? I don't want to be such a rigid young Earth creationist that I can't say, maybe the gap theory is correct. So then you start to look into it. And then you start to look at the predictions that were made from the young Earth creationist, like Jason Lisle, and you go, wow, we don't need to invoke that the heavens are so like billions of years old, because that's not what it's referring to. It just says that the heavens are of old. So it's a subjective term, right? How old is old? Well, 600 years is old. 6,000 is pretty old. 7,000 is old too, right? So I just didn't want to get caught into a mindset where I give no wiggle room to myself. Like everything, I want to study and I want to expand and go with the better model. And the young Earth creation model is vastly superior. The critics will never admit it because they don't like to admit these things. They don't like to admit that what we learned in school was wrong. And then some of them spent even more money to learn it again, and that they've wasted their lives learning something that's nonsense. And they'll never admit that. But we will here. We'll tell them, I regret that I learned that nonsense in school. But it's okay. Now we know how to refute it even better and have a better answer for the model of diversity on life on Earth. And we answer it so easy.
Yeah, I mean, you can look in every field, and we've had creation scientists from just about every field, Matt. Astronomy, biology, genetics, biochemistry, geology. We've got several visiting geologists on Standing for Truth very frequently. We actually just did. And what's interesting is in Redeem Zoomer's video, he does speak about hominins. And we just did with Dr. Peter Line, who I view as an authority on the topic. He's really done his research on hominin evolution. We literally just did a 5-hour seminar addressing all things hominins. So let's see, from the theistic evolutionists that want to appeal to hominin evolution or so-called hominin evolution, let's see them engage those high-level arguments. We also, on the weekend, Saturday, we had a 4-hour seminar with Dr. John Hartnett, who's a physicist and cosmologist. And he went over several irrefutable lines of evidence for young Earth creation, such as the decaying magnetic field, dinosaur soft tissue, collagen. You know, we find these biomaterials where we shouldn't find them if these fossils really are tens of millions of years old. We talked about the C14 in diamonds and in coal. There should be no C14. That should have all been decayed away if these samples, especially diamonds, if they were billions of years old. Rescue devices like instrument contamination, environmental contamination, this argument that says nearby nuclear material can recharge the C14 in the diamonds, that doesn't work. You'd need at least 15,000 times the amount of nuclear material to do that. So all those rescue devices, they've been demolished, they've been addressed. And so we have what the Bible clearly says, Matt. And then we also have the scientific evidence that confirms what the Bible literally says. And they'll say, well, creationists, you know, they just interpret everything literally. Well, we interpret the Bible literarily, meaning we understand that which is a historical narrative. We understand the existence of imagery and similes and parables and symbolism and so on and so forth. And so, Matt, it's interesting what you said, because the heavens were of old, or, you know, I think the Bible talks about ancient mountains. Well, yeah, we talk about ancient civilizations, right? Ancient China, ancient Rome, because a couple thousand years ago is a long time. That is ancient. Ancient Greece, right? Norse mythology, for example. Yeah, these, or what about in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue? That was a long time ago. So like you said, 6,000 to 7,000 years is a long time. Billions of years, you can't even fathom that. And so, yeah, if someone were to ask you, Matt, what are one or two pieces of scientific evidence that would be some of the best evidence for young earth creation and against the millions and billions of years paradigm, to the point where the proponents or advocates of millions and billions of years, they really struggle with an answer. It's a line of evidence that is discriminatory in terms of this debate.
Okay, I guess one of them would be the missing meteorites. When they looked throughout the entire fossil record, they were expecting to find obviously massive amounts of meteorites because supposedly Earth was formed from them, and we know from the very comments from the scientists themselves on this that they unable to find those. I was going to hold on. I'll pull up screens. Won't give me 1 minute. I'll show you some images to prove what I'm talking about. I like to share screen. It's always kind of fun. Why just look at me? Here we go. So if meteor bombardment was constantly hitting the Earth, you would expect to find hundreds, if not thousands of meteor impacts. And when you go into the meteorites and their origins, the very book itself, they said the lack of fossil record of true meteorites is puzzling. If deep time were true and there was really, the Earth was being bombarded by meteorites, we would expect to find a lot. This is just one of the aspects I'm going to talk about, since you just specifically said the age of the Earth. So we're going to just stick with the age things, because there's a lot of different types of evidence, but they can be interpreted in different ways. But when there's lack of physical evidence for things that should be there, that's a really good one. I'm also a huge fan of radiometric dating, obviously, and radiometric dating is the very root pinnacle of all of the things that they use as evidence against young Earth creation, because the uranium and thorium decay chain in zircon crystals, when they find the lead that cannot be in zircon crystals without the decay chain, they say all that lead had to have come from the uranium that was originally trapped in there, and that takes billions of years. Therefore, that lead that is there can only exist from a huge decay chain that would have taken a very long time to occur. And that's when I would say, well, now we have two different places on Earth that have shown us that when you actually see these radioactive elements form, they form in a complete decay chain with massive amounts of daughter isotopes in higher proportion and ratios than they would have ever expected, that are rapidly decaying into these the lead and the daughter isotopes. And the proportions and ratios are what we find on Earth today, not as they would have been billions of years ago. So it's really good evidence. When? Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, guys, I might have to go soon. I'll go until Donnie is back. So sorry about that. Let's go. I've talked on this a little bit, but my favorite thing is when we're looking at the lead in these zircon crystals. This got the scientists to say this makes sense that the decay chain had to have produced all of this lead, and therefore that takes billions of years. It was a great idea, and it does make total sense until we got the physical evidence in that showed that the entire decay chain didn't need to occur slowly, just from the original uranium and thorium being trapped in zircon crystal. If that was the case, then sure, it would have taken a very, very long time. But since zircon crystals can trap other radioactive elements inside of it, including the decay chain, then There doesn't need to be massive amounts of time, because these other daughter elements have a very fast rate of decay that could be producing this lead in a rapid amount of time. And they did this exact same experiment in the United States over here, because the first experiment was done at the Proton 21 laboratories in Ukraine. And then when you get into the actual dating methods themselves, like what is it? Donnie mentioned it earlier, when they're testing other radioactive elements with one another, and they compare them to see where the dates actually they get massive amounts of discordance. Matter of fact, the more methods that are added, the more discordant the results become, meaning they don't line up with one another when they should.
Right.
And that is not good. That just shows you that the results aren't even getting the results that they need to get for evidence of it being old in the first place. So when you can't get actual dates correct, then it all falls apart. But I ignore those mostly, and I just go straight to the observable evidence in laboratories that shows you when they form in the opposite ratio as what they expected. The decay rate's rapid, and it's forming lead very, very quickly, and it doesn't take billions of years to form. So those are my two favorite.
And what's interesting, and I know we just hit the hour mark. We said we were going to go for about an hour, and you have another obligation. So we'll start to wind down here. But I love the helium and zircon crystals point, because it not only limits the age of the earth, right, Matt? Dr. Russell Humphreys has put out a paper where he's actually measured the rate of helium diffusion, right? The fact that we find an abundance of helium and zircon crystals that are apparently billions of years old. We should not find all that helium. It's a very slippery molecule. It would have dissipated into the atmosphere. We find a little bit, but not the amount that we find. And so he put out a technical paper, which I've never seen rebutted in a sophisticated way, showing that the rate, when he does all the calculations, it actually limits the earth to between 6 and 10,000 years. So not only do we have helium and zircon crystals bringing us right to 6 to 10,000 years, but we have mutation rate data, which we're going to be spending a lot of time in our upcoming presentations, which I'm excited for. Let me get these last couple questions, Matt, then we'll wrap it up, brother, and let you get out of here.
Yeah, I just found out people are coming over in minutes. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, this is an hour flew by. That's why when we say, ask us anything live Q&A, we really do need 4 hours. An hour flies by. And so Truth and Tello says, and the land, she became formless and void, the gap theory, and darkness upon faces of deep, and so on and so forth. Now, the problem is it doesn't work, because the first verse is a perfect verb in Hebrew, and verse 2 is simply describing the state of the earth at the time God created it. There's no gap. And the earth, God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth, the state at that time, was formless and void, right? And then he starts adding to it and shaping it and bringing in the land and so on and so forth. So then I guess the last question we'll have time here for is a question on kinds. I may have missed it, but it was from one of our favorites, Sydney Raptor. And our definition of kind, Matt, and we've done whole talks on this, organisms, groups of organisms that can be traced back to a common ancestor. That would be a kind. We've done that with humans, for example. We've looked at Y chromosome dissimilarity. We've looked at linkage blocks. Why are there so many large linkage blocks still in the human genome if there's been hundreds of thousands of years of scrambling and gene conversion and recombination? Shouldn't be the case. Mutation rates, mitochondrial DNA, so on and so forth, DNA function. All of those combined, orphan genes, right? Those have all separated ancestries where you have humans as their own created kind. And then next to them, you'd have chimpanzees and bonobos going back to their own created kind, gorillas as their own, and then your orangutan species as their own created kind. So we have answered the question of kinds. We've answered the phylogeny challenge. And so, Matt, anything you wanted to add to the kind point?
Yeah, the genetic boundaries is the answer that everybody's looking for when what is a kind, the 2018 Rockefeller University study that found genetic boundaries, and you trace them backwards, and there's no convergence on the consensus sequence between what they expected to find. Because if you go backwards in time, you would find the human and chimpanzee consensus sequence would combine. Maybe not the Homo sapiens, but you would go back to Homo erectus and you would trace it backwards in time. And eventually those consensus sequence would trace backwards until they converge with one another. And you would do that with every known species, right? The dog would go back to the bear dog, right? The bear would go back to the bear dog. We didn't find that. We found genetic boundaries that are straight lines, independent origins, exactly what we would expect to find. And the next presentation I do on the channel will be specifically what is the kind and how we can identify them using the DNA barcoding website itself.
Boom. And I can't wait for that. So for those in our audience, I appreciate you all tuning in. Let's get this last one in, then we're going to call it a night. So this has been fun. Bread of Life, good to see you. Rebecca, always appreciate the questions. What is the most preposterous claim of evolution in your opinion? That's a good question because there are many. Matt, what's one that comes to mind? I mean, I think the theory of universal common descent in general is quite preposterous to say that strawberries in humans, or, you know, we and fruit flies are related through common ancestry, that we all go back to a single-celled like ancestor, which apparently evolved into a multi-celled ancestor, into a fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal, and then eventually a man. So I think it's just the theory in general is preposterous. And Matt, you and I, we engage the most militant atheists and evolutionists on the internet. But in our personal lives, I know myself when I talk to people outside who are more open-minded, and they'll say, yeah, of course I believe in evolution, but they don't really know much about it. And I'll say, you do realize that the theory teaches that you and a worm or you and a mosquito are related through common ancestry. And, you know, they recognize in that moment, yeah, like that's pretty wild. And these are open-minded people, right? Obviously within the theory, there are a lot of wild, preposterous claims. Does one come to mind for you, Matt?
Yeah, one I mentioned earlier, the pig-ape hybrid hypothesis,
right.
to identify, to make sense of the genetic data and the breakdown of phylogeny. I like Dinosauroid, even though it was more of a hypothesis on what would happen if the asteroid didn't kill the dinosaurs and they would evolve into humans, called Dinosauroids. That's a good one. And the infinite monkey theory, like if you left just an infinite amount of monkeys in a room typing on a typewriter, they would eventually type out Shakespeare. There's a lot of good ones. There's some funny ones in there. I like all those. I don't know if they fit into evolution, but they somehow do. All these
actually, that lizard, that lizard or reptile one, we put out a video on that a while ago, didn't we?
Yes, it's under a playlist that I have called Crazy Things Evolution Believes.
Yeah,
that was a good one. Yeah, and it's funny how much they talk about the human design is perfect. Humans have taken over the entire world. The design of human beings is like the ultimate pinnacle of evolution. And I'm because they're evolutionary teachers, right? They're not creationists, and they're admitting this on film. It's good.
Yeah. So we'll have to post those videos, show people where they can find.
We'll just re-upload them again. That'll be
fun.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of them on Patreon too. Those videos showing the most preposterous. So great question, Bread of Life. Preposterous claims of evolution, you know, and obviously they do have a lot of fair points. And those are the points that you and I focus the most on. Endogenous retroviruses. We focused a lot on those. Chromosome 2 fusion, pseudogenes, nested hierarchies, dating methods. You've done a whole book on dating methods. But for those in the audience, stay tuned. At the beginning, we gave a link to our upcoming talk at TCCSA on June 17th. Did Adam and Eve exist? Yes. We've also got our upcoming debate with conspiracy cats, Adam, Eve, and biblical creation. We're going to show people like Redeemed Zoomer and these theistic evolutionists that you don't need to twist what the Bible clearly says about separate ancestry and Adam and Eve. The Bible says that Adam's the first man, Eve's the mother of all living. Adam was created of the dust of the ground, Eve from his side or his rib. Jesus says from the beginning of creation, he made them male and female, clearly referring back to creation week. If theistic evolution were true or old earth creation was true, that makes no sense because apparently anatomically modern humans came about 200,000 years ago, but the earth is 4.6 billion years. That's not exactly the beginning of the creation, is it, Matt?
No,
And so that's
very
the
late.
tail end of it. That's the tail end of it.
Yeah.
So we got to
Very
believe what
strange.
Jesus says. And Matt and I, we're going to show, as we have shown, that we don't need to twist these clear scriptures that are teaching separate ancestry and a literal Adam and Eve, because the scientific data from genetics and biology, just a couple of fields, has actually confirmed biblical history. So, Matt, my brother, any final words, final thoughts?
Well, a person said a funny one in the comment section. I just looked over and it said that the T-Rex to the chicken is a really good one.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That is true.
Bird to dinosaurs, because they'll just say, well, I mean, chickens did not come directly from a T-Rex, came from a theropod-like dinosaur, which a T-Rex was a theropod.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we should do a show one day, the most preposterous claims of evolution, and get people's input and thoughts from the live chat too.
That'd be fun.
Redefined Living says cow to whale. That was a wild one. And then they were forced to change to what? Wolf to whale. You know, we give that presentation. We got the tiny little Pakicetus, and then you got the massive blue whale. Just imagine the incredible changes, novel changes that needed to take place for
so many
evolutionary progression.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, I think this was fun. You know, this was impromptu. To those in the audience, this was impromptu because we were scheduled with Ben Kissling and Sam for a response, which we have a lot to respond to. We have a lot of material and notes to redeem Zoomer. We did reschedule that. So, you know, pray for a speedy recovery for Ben Kissling. We'll get that in there soon. And June's going to be a busy month. Especially for Matt and I. We got a lot of talks, presentations, a formal debate to do, so stay tuned for that. And this last week of May, we got several big events, including a soteriology open mic coming up on Friday, a Nature of God debate coming up on Nature of God debates Friday, open mic is on Thursday, and then Saturday night we got our big canon debate, Catholics versus Protestants. Okay, Matt. Nice. We're going to let you get out of here, brother. I'm going to get out of here as well. To the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate your hour or so worth of questions, comments, challenges from our critics. We always enjoy interacting with your comments. God bless you all.
And if you guys want to see more on the age of the earth, if you really want the evidence and look at all the scientific studies on that, go over to the Quest for the Age of the Earth, where we go all through all of these studies that show you using radiometric dating that is completely wrong, and why it's wrong, and why the observable evidence in laboratories confirms young earth creation. You will be shocked. And the new seafloor spreading data that comes directly from the peer-reviewed published paper that showed 260-year-old lava flows date 22 million years. And when you do the math to the oldest age of the seafloor, you get about 4,000 years. It lands right on the biblical timeline again. So perfect. So evidence is everywhere. It's so easy.
If you go to the website, standfortruthministries.com, the Quest series, Matt, that you've done such a good job editing. There's the Quest for Noah, the Quest for the Age of the Earth, the Quest for Eve. So this is all the scientific data. These old earth creationists and these theistic evolutionists, they don't need to hold to these positions where they have to spend so much time and energy twisting what the scripture clearly says about separate ancestry, about the age of the earth. Again, we covered the points dealing with the underlying word for yom, or for day, which is yom. God could have used other words, other phrases. So the scientific evidence backs up the young earth creation interpretation of the Bible, doesn't it, Matt?
Exactly. And that's why we've made predictions based off of it, and they always work. You know, and the critics always say, you know, it doesn't make those predictions. It's like, it's right here. There's reasons why they came up with the concepts in the first place. But we go over that sometime, because that's a big area. And that's fun.
And the best lines of evidence that we have, we further confirm that these pieces of evidence actually preclude an old earth. I mean, we just did a whole show recently with Dr. Joel Brown, a molecular biologist, and he went over their research at Creation Research Society, showing even in the most favorable conditions, Matt, how long collagen could possibly last. And even in the most favorable, one might say, unrealistic conditions that you would never find in the real world. But hey,
Mhm.
let's give it to the evolutionists. Let's give it to them. What's
Right.
the most this collagen could last? And they concluded it was somewhere between 300 and 500,000 years. Someone
Nothing.
might say, well, that's a long time.
It's
Is
not
it?
even a million.
It's not
It
even a
needs to
million. We
last for
find collagen.
65.
Exactly. They need at minimum 65 million years.
Yeah.
And yet they're finding max in the most favorable of conditions, Matt.
Yeah.
3 to
Never gonna get it.
500,000 years.
You're sitting in a cupboard, hidden from sunlight, perfect conditions
Yeah.
for 65 million a year. Never gonna happen.
Yeah. And if the iron preservation hypothesis worked, Matt, wouldn't they be utilizing that, making billions of dollars to preserve all these different foods and snacks? I mean, just preserve it for life, right?
You would think so. I mean, they removed the enzymes and they got some good shelf life out of it. But yeah, they could do a whole lot better. 65 million year old Campbell soup.
Yeah. 65 million year old McDonald's French fries.
And in reality, meat itself, with lots of iron, by the way, heme iron flowing through meat, it browns and oxidizes and goes bad pretty quick.
Yeah. The only thing that could really last 65 million years would probably be McDonald's French fries.
Yeah.
So whatever they're doing with those, yeah, you spill some of those on the floor of your car and come back to them 10 years later, they still look the same.
Yeah, scary. That's probably not food.
Scary, yeah. All right, brother, you got your guests over now?
Yeah, I gotta go.
All right, we're gonna call it a night, and I look forward to doing this again. So, Matt, good job tonight, brother. Time flies by. To the audience, thanks so much for tuning in. This was a lot of fun. God bless all. Standing for Truth is out.